Now, at some point or another, you're going to want or need to replace a hose bib or outdoor spigot. And it's actually a very easy thing to do. It doesn't take a whole lot of time and is very inexpensive. Now, you might be wanting to do this for numerous reasons. Maybe you just can't fix it to stop it from leaking, or maybe you just want a completely different look altogether. But whatever the purpose is, I'm going to show you step by step just how easy this is to replace or install a new hose bib. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, so obviously here is my outdoor faucet, and before I get into the actual instructions or how I go about replacing these, some very important things to keep in mind are not all outdoor faucets are going to be the same, especially based on geographical location. So for instance, I'm down here in the South. Most of our outdoor faucets or spigots are plumbed up just like this, where we have a pipe coming out of the wall and they're screwed onto that pipe and they're just fully exposed like you see here. Obviously in the South, we don't get a whole lot of freezing, so that's not really a concern here. However, if you're someone that's in the North, especially if you're north of like the Mason-Dixon line, most likely what you are gonna have are called freeze-proof faucets. And the way that those work is, instead of everything being just exposed out here outside of the home, yours is actually inside the home, inside the wall, obviously where it's not getting nearly as cold during those winter months. For the most part though, in many instances, the install steps are going to be the same as we have down here in the South. It's just located in a different area. All right, so before we get started with this, the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we don't have water going to the outdoor faucet that we're about to work on. Now, if you're on city water, more than likely you're gonna have a shutoff valve. A lot of times they're out in your front yard or somewhat near the foundation of the outside of your home. So you'll need to locate where your shutoff valve is, and a lot of times, especially if it's in the ground, it's gonna require a special tool that you can buy pretty much anywhere. They've got them in your local home improvement stores, they're on Amazon and other online retailers, which, like always, for your convenience, I'll have links for those along with everything else you're gonna see in this video, from the tools and materials I'm gonna use. I'll have links for everything down in the description down below, so when you click on those links, it will take you directly to whatever you wanted to check out. So anyways, you may have to have one of those tools to shut off that main valve. I personally have a well, so I will not need a special tool in order to turn off the water coming into my home. There's actually a few ways that this can be done. So for me, the best and closest option is actually right outside my house in the backyard. I have this little cover right here that when I take this cover off, down inside is my main shutoff that is coming directly into the home. Now, I can't guarantee that most people will have this. In fact, probably most people will not have this that have a well. If you're on public city water, you may have something like this to look out for on the outside of your home though. But now I'll just really quickly show you what pretty much every person that has a well, where their shutoff will be. So this is inside of my well house. If you come right to where your well pump is, you will almost always have a ball valve that is in between the pump and then the water line that's going into your home. All you'd have to do is turn that valve to the off position. Once you form a cross like this, typically for ball valves, that means it is shut off, whereas inline means the water is running freely. So we want to make sure that that is turned off. All right, now that I've got that main water valve shut off, now I want to make sure that I've taken all the pressure off of my plumbing so that when I go to start taking this apart, I don't just have water spraying all over the place. So all I need to do is just open up the valve and just let it drain out. All right, so as you can see, we no longer have any pressure on this outdoor faucet or on our plumbing. So now I can go about starting the replacement of this hose bib. All right, if you're planning on doing any plumbing, one of the tools I would really recommend that you always have is a pipe wrench. But what I like to do is, so here is my actual spigot. Back here is the plumbing coming out of my home. So what I like to do is I'd like to take my pipe wrench and I put it on my plumbing, or that pipe that's coming out of my home. So just like that. So I've actually got it pointing over here to my right, and that is so I can give counter force to what I'm about to do next. All right, so all of these hose bibs are different. Some of them are gonna have what are almost like built-in nuts on them. I don't know if you can see that or not, but we've got some flat lines which is there so that we can actually put a wrench on it. And if you're able to do it this way, this is by far the best way. You're not gonna really have any slippage, and it's just gonna make removing this a whole lot easier. Now, there are a couple of different thoughts as to how you should go about doing this, especially if this is on here really tight. So for me personally, I try to balance when I'm doing this so that I have force going this way, but then also force being pulled this way to kind of offset each other so as to not do any damaging to my plumbing. There's also an argument for if we've got our pipe wrench like so, if we take our adjustable wrench and we put it up near where our pipe wrench is, so I've got it pointing kind of at 3 o'clock, the pipe wrench is at 1. Most of the time you're not going to be able to just do this with one hand because they're going to be on there pretty tight. So you might have to use 2 hands and just twist them towards each other. And as you can see, we're starting to get this outdoor faucet a little bit looser. Once you reach a certain point, I'll be able to take it off by hand. The other thought is you can have one being pulled this way, one being pulled this way, and then obviously you're able to use both your hands. You can get a little bit more leverage and it works just as well. Now I've got that loose enough, I can go ahead and just pull it off just like so. All right, so now I'm down to my bare pipe that's coming out of the wall here. As you can see, I've got some Teflon tape on here. What I want to do is I want to go ahead and remove as much of this as I can by hand. And then once I've got most of that Teflon tape removed by hand, that's when I'll take usually a steel bristle brush like this, or maybe even use some steel wool, and I'll just go around my threads just like so, just continuing to clean out that residual Teflon tape that's stuck down into the threads. Now, this is something I also do pretty much any time that I am dealing with threads like this or with plumbing threads, not just to remove the Teflon tape, but I'm also just wanting to clean everything up. Obviously, this valve has been here for a little while, so oftentimes you might have some sediment built up into the threads. Maybe you'll have some calcium deposits to where things have hardened up. And you just want to make sure that you're getting those threads completely cleaned out to make the new installation as leak-proof as possible. All right, so now that I've got those threads all nice and cleaned up, we got them shining again. Now what I want to do is I want to reapply some Teflon tape. And there is a correct way and an incorrect way to apply this. And I've got a video that actually goes in depth onto all the mistakes that can be made when doing this. But for the sake of this video, the most important thing that we need to be paying attention to is what direction are we putting it on. So in this case, I'm facing the plumbing that's coming out of my home. If we're facing the pipe and we have standard threads, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're putting our plumber's tape on in a clockwise direction. That way, when we go and we tear our plumber's tape, that plumber's tape is facing away from, or I should say, it's in the same direction as we are going to be spinning on our new spigot. So I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So I want to make sure that I put my plumber's tape on about a thread or 2 back from the entrance. We don't want to cover this up at all, as that can cause issues down the road. But once you've got that first wrap, then it makes the remaining wraps a whole lot easier to make sure you're putting it on nice and tight. I want to be stretching my tape just slightly to make sure that it's going down and seating into the threads. And then for me personally, I always like to make sure that I overlap all my tape with at least 3 to 4, maybe even 5 wraps. So once we've made all of our wraps, we can just tear it off like so. Continue to wrap it around in that clockwise direction. And so again, we ended it here. Since our last lap is going in that clockwise or facing that clockwise direction, as we tighten on the new spigot, it's just gonna tighten with it. Whereas if we would have put this on counterclockwise, once it started getting into those threads where that last wrap is, it's actually going to want to pull it up and start loosening it, which is then going to provide a worse seal. All right, so now that we've got our plumber's tape on our threads, the next step is to install the new valve. And that is this right here. Now, one thing I do want to say before I get more into this is there is a step after the valve, because without it, it can make this whole installation be against code and can also possibly produce a dangerous situation. So make sure to stick around after I get this installed and I'll show you exactly what it is, because they all need it. One thing that's very important to pay attention to, especially when you're purchasing your new valve, is to look at the old one. They're almost always going to be stamped just like this one is right here. And as you can see, it says 1/2. That is for the diameter of the interior threads that are then connecting this to the plumbing coming out of the home. So you want to make sure that you match those two up. As you can see on this new one, it says 1/2 inch. So it's going to fit on these threads and this piping just as well as the old one did. The difference between that and the one I'm replacing and this new one is this is just a 1/4 turn, just like that. All you have to do is turn it a 1/4 turn and it's completely open. So not a bunch of spinning to it, just one real quick 1/4 turn to open and close it. And you can easily control how much water output there is just by how much you spin it, just like you would any other faucet. I just find these to be a lot handier to where I can just turn it on full bore right off the jump. So all I need to do now is take my new hose bib here and start spinning it onto the pipe that's coming out of my home. I'll just keep spinning it until it gets tight enough to where I can't really spin it anymore by hand, because that is going to happen just about right there. So what do we need to do? Well, kind of need to do things in the opposite order that we did when we removed the old hose bib. So I'm just going to take my pipe wrench again. I'm going to put it on the pipe that's coming out of my home. This time I'm putting it in the opposite direction. Obviously, I'm going to be pulling in the opposite direction that I was when I was loosening it. And in this case, again, I've got what looks like a nut built in to this particular outdoor faucet. So I can use the adjustable wrench, which again, if you're able to do that, I really recommend. This is the safest way to not mar up your new outdoor faucet. And it's also going to give you the most surface contact between the wrench and the hose bib, which is going to allow for you to provide a little bit more torque with less effort. Now, again, if we did not have this on here, there are some other tools I mentioned you can use, which you can. However, if you put a pipe wrench on this, just like this, they all have jaws on them. This can be a pipe wrench, a crescent wrench, channel locks. They all have jaws on them. And if you go to tighten it down, if there's any slippage, you're gonna mar this up, and it's just gonna kind of make it look not as good. And it also then might cause some sharp edges on it. Again, if you do not have that built-in nut to where you can't use an adjustable wrench, what I have used in the past and work really, really well are these strap wrenches like you see here. So the way that these work is we just take the rubber lasso like this, we put it on to whatever it is that we're trying to tighten down. We just pull on this rubber to where it tightens it down as much as possible manually. Then once we've got it about as tight as we can get like that, then when we start to spin it in the direction that we want to actually turn it, it's going to tighten up that rubber even more to where when we keep pulling it in that direction, as you can see, I am able to tighten it down even more, like as if I'm using a wrench. So this is another tool that can be used in order to tighten this up and also not do any damage to your new faucet. However, again, in my case, I'm just going to use my adjustable wrench again, and this way I'm going to be able to get as much torque as possible and get it tightened down to where it needs to be. So just like that. All right, so now this is where a lot of people will just say, I'm done. My new spigot is installed or outdoor faucet. I'm ready to turn my water on and start using it. But here's the problem. This is currently completely against code. And it's also making for a possibly dangerous and hazardous situation. What you need in order to make this code compliant and safe is you need this right here. This is called a vacuum breaker. This is basically like a check valve for your outdoor faucet, in that it's only going to allow for water to flow out. Now, a lot of people find that to be odd. They don't think that this is necessary. However, I can tell you there's a reason this is code. This has happened before where there have been either no pressure or negative pressure events to where somebody had their hose just laying in some hazardous water, whatever that might be, and there was a negative pressure event where that water then got pulled into their water supply, and now their water supply got contaminated. But all we have to do now is take this vacuum breaker and put it on the threads where typically we would hook up our hose. These don't have to be incredibly tight, but you do want to make sure that you got them tightened down enough to where you don't have just a bunch of water spraying out of the top of this. So just where I'm getting some really good resistance right about there. And then the last step to installing this vacuum breaker comes down to this screw right here. Now, what this screw does is I'm going to go ahead and manually tighten it down, turn it clockwise, and that's about as far as I can spin it by hand. What this screw does is then it secures this vacuum breaker down to the threads that it's on. So it's not as easy to turn off, especially like if you're removing a hose. I'm sure that you have experienced this, or at least most of you have, where you're trying to remove your hose. Well, the vacuum breaker is trying to spin off as well. And then I can take an adjustable wrench to further tighten this down, like so. Now for me personally, and technically in a lot of places this would not be to code either, I'm going to tell you what I do and why I do it. However, just bear in mind, it might not be code where you're at. I am always very careful when I'm tightening these down. I do not tighten them down to where I'm putting a lot of force on them, because these heads will snap off. Now here's the thing, these threads are actually designed to snap off. In order to bring this to code compliance in some places, that actually has to be done. And the reasoning for that is they don't want people going out there, they hate these vacuum breakers, and they go and they start taking them off. They want to make sure that this mechanism is permanent, it's stuck in place, to where that can't happen. For me personally, I am not going to do that because these vacuum breakers do go bad. And when they do go bad, if you've got that snapped off, it makes removing these very, very difficult to almost impossible without sometimes you might even need to take a saw to it if you want to preserve the outdoor faucet that you currently have. Most of the time though, if this is snapped off, this is secured on there, the whole thing has to be replaced. So just make sure you're checking local code to make sure you're doing everything properly. All right, so now all I need to do is make sure this valve is in the off position and go turn on my main valve to start sending water to this new outdoor faucet. All right, so now my main water is back on. I can just feel around my new faucet here, make sure I don't have any leaking. I don't notice any water around where we put this on at, which I don't feel anywhere around it. So we have a good tight seal here. So now all that's left to do is test the new faucet and make sure that it's working properly. Again, if I turn this a full quarter turn, it's gonna be going full blast, but I'm just gonna show you really quickly. I can just barely turn it on and I start getting water coming out just like any other faucet. But then if I do go to that full quarter turn, I've got plenty of water pressure. I've got a ton of water coming out of there. I don't have any coming out of the top of the vacuum breaker here, so everything is installed properly. And like always, like I said earlier, for your convenience, I'm gonna have links for everything you saw in this video, from the materials to all the tools that were used. I'll have links for everything down in the description down below, to where when you click on those links, it will take you directly to whatever you clicked on, so you can check this all out for yourself. Hey, really quickly before you go, if you found value in this video, then I am 100% sure you're gonna find value in another video that I did in the past, where instead of just completely replacing the hose bib or outdoor spigot, if the problem that you're experiencing is a leak, there's actually numerous ways that you can easily fix this up. One of them is definitely more of a permanent solution, and some of them will just kind of get you by. Either way, I go over how to stop those leaks super easily, and they don't cost hardly any money, if any money at all. So if you'd be interested in learning more about that, then all you have to do is click on this video right over here. When you click on it, it will take you directly to that video. But I hope that you found value in this video, and if you did, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button right down below. And of course, if you have any questions or comments still, you can leave those down in the comment section. And I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.